I'm sort of expecting that we'll see a close to opening day lineup on Saturday night. And I think part of that also is what the Jets are doing, a season ticket holder appreciation game, all the special guests coming in for the Howard Chunk statue unveiling. That'll be a night that they really do want to put their best foot forward. But from Rick Bowness's perspective, after that, you've only got 2 more games. And I think it would make a lot of sense to basically roll out the lineup that, he's going to expect to go at it with the New York Rangers on the 14th of October in those games to really reinforce some of the things that he's been going through in practice and give them as a group some game experience together in a very different way than maybe we'd seen in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, I would almost say it's not if, it's definitely, like, they definitely have to do that. And I think that makes some of the decisions both unfortunate for some guys and easy for others, because I think what ultimately you're going to go with a more experienced group. You're going to go with a group that you can trust to implement those systems, that can stay disciplined, that can play within them. But I also think at the same time, you're also finding out who fits and who doesn't, because this is where I think it's a little bit, I think this is the biggest question heading into the season. Is this team built mentally for this system? I think physically they're built for this system, right? They're a strong skating team. That's what we've heard Rick Bowness say throughout camp and really since he arrived, is that this is a quick skating team, a strong skating team, a fast team. All of those things are true. What's been difficult for this club, particularly under systems of Maurice and then Dave Lowry, is the mental side, where giving up on a certain system and going back to your own way of playing or your own instincts, this is going to involve a massive commitment from the beginning, and it's going to have to be everyone pulling in the same direction. So you can't really do both. Assess the younger guys, give them, Rick Bowness is saying we're going to give everybody a good look. I don't know if that's possible, with what they want to do, because you need to be getting everybody involved, you need to get the group that is going to be fighting for positions or earning positions a great opportunity to learn the systems, to get them down packed, to make the mistakes that they're inevitably going to make during preseason, in which they can't make come October 14th, the New York Rangers. This team cannot afford a slow start to the season. They can't have these growing pains. Now, there's going to be some, to be sure, but that's the goal, I think, of this training camp, is to minimize those as much as possible heading into that first game. Because again, this is a tough division they're in. This is a lot to ask of them. And I wonder if this team has the ability to stay true to this system. If they, because you're going to have to buy in as much to the system as you are to the man in this situation, because Rick Bowness's biggest job is to convince everybody that this is winning hockey, that this is going to be the recipe for a turnaround. And what I think has been the knock on this club for years is when things don't go well, or when things go off the rails, it rains, it pours with this group. So I think that's going to be the big thing here, is that this team needs to remain committed to it. They need to go through these growing pains. And the unfortunate part is, if you're not fighting for the 6th, 7th, 8th spot on defense, or the 13th, 14th spot on forward, there's really no time or patience to hold your hand when there are other guys who also need to learn it. They're going to have a much bigger role with this team moving into October.
Yeah, no, and as Rob Mahoney just said, Jeff hits the nail on the head. It takes commitment to sustain that aggressive check for 60 minutes. And, I think it will also test the fortitude or the will of the club, and how much they've been buying in, because let's face it, nothing's guaranteed. They do have a pretty tough schedule right out of the gate. And if the results are there, it's easy to continue to, okay, guys, see, this is working. Let's go forward. What will be interesting, and hopefully this doesn't happen, but if they do have a tough start and they're struggling with some of these things that Rick is implementing, the ability to stay focused and continue to do it, will be a big test of, I think, a lot of the personnel on this hockey club, because there's no guarantees that if you make these changes and you buy in and you play that way, that you're going to get wins right out of the gate.
We keep hearing that this room is tighter than people suggest, that the guys all like each other, that 14 guys went to Josh Morrissey's wedding, and, there's the Banff trip coming up here and all that stuff. I mean, it takes a lot. I mean, that commitment is massive. It's massive. It's a commitment not just to the systems. It's a commitment as much as anything to one another in that locker room, that it's not about individual stats. It's not about individual, points and production. Because guess what? There's a handful of guys here that are going to be looking for a new contract in a year's time, and they're going to be asked to play a style of game that they might not A, like, and B, certainly aren't used to. So if you can convince all those guys, I mean, that's part of the reason why I think Pierre-Luc Dubois played last game. Like, I was thinking to myself, as I'm making these lists of observations, I'm thinking, holy smokes, this guy seems really disinterested on some shifts. And then I'm kind of like, why is he playing in this game? Like what is happening here? And I don't put a lot of stock into some of that, but the commitment needs to start now. If you're asked to play an aggressive style of hockey where it's A to B, back and forth, quick transition, really aggressive team, you have to be a start and stop hockey team. And those are hockey fundamentals. That's the reality of the situation here. If you're going to play this kind of system, you need to be sure that your hockey fundamentals are down pat. Because if you're not playing within that structure, you've already lost out on this. Because we've seen this before. I mean, Paul Maurice tried to implement a very similar style to this team a few years ago, with being like, everyone doesn't need to finish their body checks, but everyone needs to be on the puck, equally. And that just never came to fruition. That just never happened. And Connor Hellebuck, definitely covered off a lot of those blemishes. But really, over the last couple of years, this team's been asked to play defensive hockey. They just haven't listened or been as committed to it as they need to be to execute it. And I'm wondering, really, and all the early signs are there, right? Everyone's there to learn. Everyone, it's a new environment, and you can feel it. There certainly is that element where everybody feels like everyone's coming in to learn a new thing. It's exciting. How exciting that will be in a few weeks, or more importantly, a couple months, I think will tell the tale of this team. And it starts at camp and leads into obviously the regular season come October 14th.
No, it's a great point. Jeff Hamilton's with us from the Winnipeg Free Press. Give us a sub, folks, if you haven't already. Hit that red subscribe button and make sure you're joining us daily, live on YouTube at 1 o'clock p.m. And, of course, if you're subscribed and you missed the live show, just pop into YouTube afterwards, and the freshest Winnipeg Sports Talk content will be there. And, of course, for the audio listeners, you can also get Winnipeg Sports Talk fresh every day, just in time for your drive home, by getting subscribing to the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. Hammer, you mentioned Dubois, and it's funny that you brought that up. I mean, he was the one vet that sort of made the trip. Mason Appleton, Dylan DeMello. There are rules that, you have to have X amount of NHL players with a certain amount of NHL experience. I don't know if we should take anything from the fact that he was the guy that's, kind of being one of the veterans that has to make the trip going forward. But, a lot's been made of, what happened in the offseason. He's certainly downplayed it and said all the right things, and seemingly has been buying into being a Winnipeg Jet and being a part of it. But what do you make of just his, because he's so important to the club. I mean, they're going to need some serious production out of that number 2 line, even if he's not playing with Kyle Connor. And then, of course, there's the question about what happens at the end of this year. How do you see things going for Dubois? And just comment on his situation because of how important he is to this club, not to mention the assets that were given to acquire Mr. PLD.
Look, I don't take any stock into yesterday's. And maybe, maybe you'd like to see him try a little bit harder on some of those shifts. I think that his inclusion in that game had everything to do with playing alongside Cole Perfetti. Yeah. I think that's why he went there. I think this is a guy who needs to continue to gel with him. They're going to be playing on a line with Blake Wheeler, so there needs to be that chemistry. I thought that, I even wrote about it. I wasn't about to praise Pierre-Luc Dubois' game, but I thought there certainly was some chemistry between him and Perfetti yesterday, just from a space dynamic. Like, they seem to know where each other were. They seem to, create space for each other with the puck. And so those were, like, again, minor pluses, positives from it. But I think, look, I don't take any stock into the shift or his game yesterday, because I take stock into his season last year. I mean, this is a guy who cared more than anybody. I mean, this is a guy who, there certainly was consistency issues over time. I think he'd be the first person to admit that. It wasn't a perfect season, but it sure as hell was a better season than a lot of players on this team. And, from a number of different standpoints, from a give a shit meter, to from a guy who was accountable afterwards, who said the right things. This guy cares. And, as far as his contract stalemate situation, over the summer and the potential for him to leave, I mean, do you blame him? I mean, do you blame him for not wanting to commit to a team that was in such disarray? I mean, everybody wants to win, a Stanley Cup. That's why you play this game. And I think at the end of the day, he looked into what was an opportunity for him to sign a long-term contract with a team that didn't have a coaching staff, with a group of, with a group that stripped their captain of the sea and has a new leadership group, So I don't really take much into that, because I think if things can, at the end of the day, hockey's a business, and you need to do what's right for yourself. You need to do what's right for your family. Of course, fans here in Winnipeg want him to stand up and say, hey, I want to be here for a decade, or I want to end my career here, and Winnipeg's great. I think he likes Winnipeg. I don't think he has a problem with the players. I don't think he has a problem with the organization. I don't think he has a problem with the city. I think he has a problem with the direction of the team. And for him to take a wait and see approach is exactly what, the PA barters for in their collective bargain and their CBAs. So, again, you want him to not really play some of the off-season antics, have his, have his agent say, or suggest that he'd be interested in going to Montreal. Guess what? Everybody from Quebec wants to play for Montreal, and everybody not from Quebec also wants to play for Montreal. They just don't. They're a little bit smarter with what they say to their agents in the offseason. Now, anyway, it's a long roundabout way of saying I'm not concerned about Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I think at the very least there's that motivation for a bunch of guys, right? You mentioned Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Blake Wheeler, Connor Hellebuck. I mean, they're all have a couple years left on their contracts, and they're all going to be motivated to play strong hockey. The question is their motivation going to be team, or is their motivation going to be individual? And you can hear guys say over and over and over again that if you're winning as a team, everybody gets paid. Yeah, that's true. But if they aren't winning, then that argument's thrown out the window. So I think it's going to be a real test for a fair amount of guys here. Some of the guys we've heard, who had a bit of drama over the summer, they're all saying the right thing. They all seem committed. I'll be curious what the situation is here as we do our weekly talk in about 6 weeks, where this team is at, and maybe 6 months in particular, and how well this worked. Because if they're willing to put the team ahead of everything, and if you're going to keep them to their word, then it's a pretty good situation right now. If it reverts back to individual stuff, it reverts back to, back to being a business, back to getting the best deal possible, because we all know goals make, add zeros on paychecks. This is a big, big test for a lot of guys, ultimately, for the Winnipeg Jets organization to navigate through the season.
Yeah, we're going to hear from a few of the Winnipeg Jets, including Adam Lowry, in a few minutes once we're finished with Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press here with us. Yeah, just to finish on that, part of me, from listening to what Pierre-Luc Dubois had to say on a number of occasions coming out of this summer into now, like, I'm 100% with you. I think it was so miserable at the end of the season. It was such a disappointing year. I mean, I don't know anyone that would have been like, yeah, sign me up for 8 more years of that. But listen, yeah, exactly. I do think that, he's just sort of out there at some point. I don't know if there's a better way that I can put it like that, but I think that if he has a great year and the team rebounds and it's fun to play here, and, all of those things that, hopefully can turn around under Rick Bowness, although it's a lot to put on the coach's shoulders, make no mistake about it. I think that maybe we're having a different conversation about Pierre-Luc Dubois at the end of this season and into next season. Bottom line is, if he's not going to be here long-term, they're going to need to move him, because Patrick Laine is in Columbus. He's going to be scoring goals there for the next 4 seasons. For the Jets to lose a player like that they traded Laine to get for nothing, would be an absolute disaster and certainly would be a real black mark on the general manager and management. So, but bottom line is right now, he's going to have every opportunity to be a big, big part of this operation. Right now, playing with Cole Perfetti and Blake Wheeler. And that is a very, very important role for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, if they're going to go with Scheifele, Ehlers, and Connor as a clear-cut number one line, those matchups, but also defensively, on the road, that group is going to have a lot on their shoulders, and be interesting to see how Cole Perfetti can handle it and hopefully stay healthy. And then, of course, there's Blake Wheeler, who I got to give credit to. I think, since the announcement on that Friday, he has certainly participated. He seemingly has had a good attitude. It was very interesting to hear him on with Stapleton and Nyland, sounding different than we've really ever heard Blake before. And, we've talked last week, Jeff, about how this could go a couple of ways. I think there is a chance that, he's already feeling some of the weight off of his shoulders. And if it can be a liberating thing and he can buy into everything that's going on, he can still help the Winnipeg Jets win hockey games and hopefully allow for some of these other players to really raise their level, both of their role of importance with the Winnipeg Jets, like Nikolai Ehlers talked about last week.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, credit to Blake. He's handled it well. He's certainly putting in the work at camp. He's one of the guys that's asking, several questions, trying to get a better idea of the systems and, something he's going to teach. I mean, we've already talked about this. He's going to remain a leader within the dressing room. He's still going to have influence in there. It's not like he's been, pushed to the back corner of the locker room and nobody's talking to him. Everybody has given him a vote of confidence throughout the week and also expressed the ability to have more voices in the room. And I think, with more voices, with more opportunities for leadership is more opportunities to hold, each other accountable. When you have more guys, it's not just, a handful of voices, doing that kind of work, having to, get through tough situations or adversity and all those other things that leaders in the team are lean to handle. I think that's an awesome thing for other players to then, take some of that load away. I mean, we heard Blake Wheeler say it. He talked about, the captaincy being a burden, at times. And it certainly is. It's not an easy role. It's not an easy role for, you wonder why, he made comments. And I know a lot of fans didn't love them, but he makes comments about being a young team. This is a relatively young team. I mean, even talking to guys like Nick Ehlers, I mean, he's 26. He doesn't feel like 26 years old. He doesn't feel like somebody, he still feels like that young player in the team. And so there's a maturity process that comes with all this. And with maturity comes, more responsibility and more opportunity. And with those opportunities and responsibilities, it just, with more people feeling like they're a part of it, feeling like they're part of a leadership group, feeling like their voice is being heard, that's going to do wonders, I think, for this group. And it's going to allow guys to, offer what they feel maybe in past years they haven't been able to provide and feel at this point ready to do so. So it'll be interesting to see, we get from Rick Bowness a lot of the we'll see, right? When he says we'll see, he knows exactly what he's doing. It'll be interesting to see who he appoints as the alternate captains. I think there's probably going to be 4. You're probably going to see 2, away, 2 on the road or whatever, but 2 more, that is, with including, obviously, I don't know if they'll do 4 in total or whatever. It's going to be probably 4 in total, but you're looking at probably Morrissey and Mark Scheifele keeping their letters, and who the other 2 guys, maybe Nick Ehlers, maybe Kyle Connor, maybe, handful of guys could be in that group. Adam Lowry for sure. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of options there. And so I think that's going to be part of the decision for Rick Bowness, was not so much, not necessarily just, okay, is, Blake being too much of a voice, or is there not enough voices, as much as it is, okay, if we're going to have to get everybody pulling in the right direction as we do these, as we install these new systems, let's get more people feeling like they own a piece of it. And so I think that's going to be something that's a positive for this team, and certainly positive for the locker room, and hopefully positive for implementing those systems in all 3 zones.